October 5th, 2008. The Moda Center in Portland, Oregon is holding this year's edition of No Mercy. Our main event of the evening is a ladder match for the World Heavyweight Championship. Current champion Chris Jericho has been locked in a very heated and very personal feud with the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. This seesaw battle between a Showstopper trying to secure his legacy and the codebreaker trying to save the WWE and its fans from itself. How did we get here? Break the walls down with us this week as we roll this one back with a rewind. Welcome to the Feud Rewind. I'm your host, Benza Lance. The realm of professional wrestling has long been a stage for larger-than-life battles that capture the imagination of fans worldwide. Storylines that can suspend disbelief to a degree that the frayed edges of what's a shoe and a work can fool even the smartest of marks. What's needed to really pull this off exceptionally is palpable chemistry between the talent involved, to a point where it feels like we're watching a candid video of an altercation as opposed to a televised show. In 2008, an extraordinary clash unfolded between two iconic superstars, Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels, in a series of matches that left an indelible mark on the landscape of professional wrestling. With both of these gentlemen, we've explored their backstories quite heavily, with Jericho in our first ever episode, diving into his feud with Dean Malenko, and with Shawn, our own episode 9 in his iconic clash with Kurt Angle. If you would like to have a very solid foundation for this specific feud, those episodes are great places to start, as chronologically, this feud happens after both of those episodes mentioned. With all that being said, we still have quite a bit of ground to cover this week, and we start the rewind with a cup of coffee in the early part of the new millennium. It's 2002, and the WWE Universe is welcoming back a giant of our industry who, due to injury, had to retire far too soon. Taking that into consideration, when Shawn Michaels returned at SummerSlam to face Triple H in a street fight, the match was initially expected to be a one-off, a bit of a bittersweet epilogue to a storied career. However, the results of this match showed everyone that Michaels still had plenty left in the tank. One of the prominent influencers in Shawn's ears, suggesting that he compete on a more permanent basis, was Chris Jericho, a man who had idolized the Heartbreak Kid.
Come on. You know I gotcha. Yeah. One. Break the walls. Break down the walls.
At this time in 2002, remember, Jericho is the first undisputed champion. He's a certified main eventer, or at the very least, one of those types that could conceivably be your champion, and arguably at the prime of his career trajectory within the WWE. Jericho's career prospects are brighter than ever. However, at this time, like most of its history before, the company still largely favored the type of talent that would cause one to do a double take in an airport. Think your Batistas, your Brock Lesnar's, your John Cena's, etc. Jericho, being a part of the sub-6-foot club, always had something to prove, and to a degree would always have something of a chip on his shoulder due to this. To wit, heading into 2003, Chris Jericho would become obsessed with ending Shawn Michaels' career, and ultimately proving he was the superior talent, especially for the type of talent that had to be extra due to their perceived height and size limitations. Chris believed Father Time had passed Shawn by, and that we were firmly in Jericho's era.
It's not about the title, it's about being regarded as the best in the world. And I don't need the title wrapped around my gorgeous waist to be known as the best in the world, because I always will be Chris Jericho, the highlight of the night.
On the January 13th, 2003 episode of Raw, Jericho won the over-the-top challenge where he could pick his spot in that year's Royal Rumble. He chose entry number 2 while Shawn Michaels was the first one. Shawn had challenged Chris to prove Jericho's claim that he was better than Michaels. On January 19, 2003, the Royal Rumble takes place from the Fleet Center in Boston, Mass. This is our first Rumble to occur with the hard brand split. As such, whoever wins the Rumble would receive a match for the respective brand's World Championship at WrestleMania 19, either Raw's World Heavyweight Championship or SmackDown's WWE Championship. Shawn would enter as entrant number 1, with Jericho entered as the second participant. But something was a little suspicious here. Instead of Chris Jericho, it was actually his tag team partner at the time, Christian, dressed up as Jericho. This allowed the ever-opportunistic Jericho to slide into the ring from behind and attack Michaels. HBK was eliminated about 2.5 minutes into the Rumble, but he would soon get the last laugh. Roughly midway through the bout, Michaels rushed back down for the distraction while Test would eliminate Jericho himself. Jericho would last 40 minutes and was the 14th competitor eliminated. Impressive, but simply not enough to win. As one would imagine, tensions were starting to build between HBK and Jericho at this point. The two would circle each other for a few months before finally being able to touch gloves one-on-one at the showcase of the Immortals. WrestleMania 19 is important in the pantheon of professional wrestling, as this would be the culmination of the Rock and Stone Cold feud that had carried much of the Attitude Era, and the industry was firmly moving in a new direction. Taking place March 30th, 2003, from Safeco Field in Seattle, with 55,000 in attendance, it would be the Jericho and Michaels match that most would consider to be the match of the night. It was a masterclass in both storytelling and psychology that saw both competitors continuously attempting to one-up the other. Despite multiple submission attempts that targeted Shawn's previously injured back, Chris Jericho's arrogance got the best of him.
Fatigue and pain out of the racking the bodies of both these magnificent athletes. This has been one hell of a wrestling match here at WrestleMania 19. Michaels upside down, unbelievable velocity. Oh, he came back and landed on his feet, but Michaels is out. He landed on his feet. Michaels will roll up.
Not long after kicking out of the Sweet Chin music, Jericho would attempt a suplex that Michaels would counter with a roll-up pin for the 1-2-3 victory. The eruption of the crowd kept the emotions running high as the two embraced in the middle of the ring with a hug. Jericho would quickly spoil the moment by kicking Shawn in the yam bags for a low blow. This would plant the seeds of narcissistic petulance that would become a cornerstone of Jericho later on in our feud, and also endear HBK to the WWE faithful even further. On a card that featured Rock vs. Austin 3, which led to the Texas Rattlesnake riding off into the sunset, Hogan vs. McMahon, and Lesnar and Angle with the infamous Shooting Star Press spot, it could be argued that Jericho and Michaels was easily the highlight of the night. It is worth noting that this WrestleMania is often held up as one of the most praised of all time, so having the bar set that high just illustrates the type of chemistry Jericho and Michaels have. After WrestleMania, these two would be on diverging paths, so keep the memories of 2003 fresh as we jump forward a few years to 2007. In the fall of that year, there was a viral marketing campaign presented by WWE with 15-second binary-coded videos. Everybody was attempting to break the code as finally the hidden messages fulfilled their promise with the return of Chris Jericho. Always a virtuoso of reinvention, Jericho would make an awe-inspiring return on November 29, 2007, after a prolonged hiatus. With a revamped persona and an insatiable hunger for greatness, Jericho embarked on a mission to assert his superiority and etch his name among the pantheon of wrestling legends. Promising to save the WWE from the mediocrity that had run rampant in his absence, Jericho set his sights on current WWE Champion Randy Orton. Jericho's dramatic return sent shockwaves through the wrestling community, and without a doubt, some had remembered how Jericho had left, and what he had done in the past. No doubt on that list was Shawn Michaels. However, in 2008, Shawn himself was embarking on a very notable task. In late 2007, Ric Flair had made a claim that he would never retire, a sort of believable statement considering it's coming from someone like Nate. This prompted the chairman, Vince McMahon, to state that the next time Rick lost a match, he would be forced to retire. With Flair at this late point of his career, fans knew that this likely wasn't just a storyline quirk. We were indeed watching the final stages of an illustrious career. This would prompt a final WWE run for Rick, seeing him take on the likes of Randy Orton, Umaga, and MVP, among others. Flair kept pulling out wins, desperately clutching to his career. Rick, however, wasn't satisfied. He wanted to fight the best in order to prove to himself that he could still be at the top, and therefore challenged none other than Mr. WrestleMania himself, Shawn Michaels, to a match at WrestleMania 24. Michaels, knowing he had the advantage, didn't want to accept, forcing Flair to prod, poke, slap, and claw until it was accepted.
Hey, this is Ben with Feud Rewind with a quick word from our first unofficial sponsor. Water. You need some. I need some. We all need some. We're made of it. Guess what? It comes in a bunch of different varieties. Hot, cold, frozen. You can get it flavored. You can get it plain. With bubbles, no bubbles, out of your tap, out of a bottle, out of a box. The possibilities are endless. Regardless, you need some. Before we get started, go get a glass. I'm going to get one too. We'll meet back here and start the show. Thank you so much. Water.
WrestleMania 24 was held on March 30th, 2008 at the Citrus Bowl in Orlando, Florida. This match between Flair and Michaels was just a stunning masterpiece. What else would anyone expect from the caliber of performers that these two were? Flair was given one last shot to pull out his signature moves, cheap shots, struts, and the woos. The pair put on a match full of hard-hitting action, technical brilliance, scary spots, all mixed with wonderful excitement and tension. Though Flair had claimed that he would be proud to have Michaels retire him, it was very clear Rick was fighting and doing anything he could to win. Through the match, the desperation was felt and palpable, with Flair not shy to enact underhanded tactics. Michaels showed hesitation throughout the affair, not wanting to be the one to put the final nail in that coffin, which at times nearly cost him the match. Ultimately were bestowed the now iconic "I'm sorry I love you" moment before Shawn rifles Flair's head into the stratosphere, ending the career of the Nature Boy.
Flair wants to fight. Oh! My God, what a shot! Michaels with a big. And yes! Yes!
Here is your winner, the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels!
Shawn Michaels hesitated and hesitated and contemplated, but he had to do what he came to do.
Fresh off the heels of retiring Ric Flair at WrestleMania 24 in a very emotional bout, HBK had landed firmly in the crosshairs of several wrestlers who were questioning his actions, primarily Batista. The seeds were planted at Ric Flair's retirement celebration when the Animal stared down HBK and resented the fact that he had retired Rick. Jericho found himself in the middle of the feud when he questioned Shawn's intentions and suggested he took pleasure in retiring the Nature Boy. Always wanted to be the instigator, and feeling perpetually underappreciated, Jericho would be asked to be inserted into the match between Batista and Shawn at Backlash as the special guest referee, which was granted. Backlash 2008 rolls into Baltimore, Maryland on April 27, 2008. The fifth match on the card saw Michaels facing off against Batista with Jericho as our special guest referee. Over the course of the match, both competitors would trade blows and an offense pretty evenly back and forth. Near the end, Michaels lifted Batista for his Batista Bomb finisher. Michaels, however, countered out of the maneuver in midair, and when he fell, he seemed to suffer a knee injury. This would cause Jericho to check up on Michaels and also stop Batista from attacking. A frustrated Batista is pacing the ring and walks right into his sweet chin music out of nowhere. Michaels then covers Batista for a successful pinfall, winning the match. Afterwards, Michaels returns to the backstage area while limping heavily. Very clever, calculated, and resourceful. Shawn would do anything and everything to win the match. Perhaps the most notable part of this from Jericho's side is that Chris had called a fairly clean match, 50-50, not favoring one man over the other. For the wool to be pulled over his eyes like this would definitely lead to some sort of resentment, as we would see soon enough. On the following night's Raw, Jericho is hosting his talk show segment at this time, the Highlight Reel. On this iteration of his show, Jericho is awarding Shawn Michaels with a trophy for Best Actor in Sports Entertainment. Jericho called this a masterpiece of performance and believed that the injury was a facade. In turn, Michaels denied faking this injury and clarified that he was hurt and that it was legitimate. During this whole segment, Jericho is waiting for a gotcha moment that simply just never comes. The following week, on May 5th, 2008, Jericho and Michaels are then teaming together to take on The Miz and John Morrison. Throughout this match, Jericho is hesitant to tag in Michaels until it reaches a point of pure desperation. Seemingly on only one good leg, Michaels would hit John Morrison with his sweet chin music, which prompts Jericho to pin Morrison following a lion salt to win the match. At this point, Shawn was either really hurt or continuing to put on a compelling performance. The following week on Raw, Jericho has admitted that his mind has now completely changed. For questioning Shawn's integrity, Jericho intends to make a face-to-face apology. Jericho is allowing Michaels the opportunity to back out of their upcoming match at Judgment Day. Shawn then admits that he wasn't hurt, which now Jericho is obviously not buying, so he eats the sweet chin music for his trouble. Shawn proclaims, "Trust me when I tell you I'm not hurt." The palpable rage is going to continue to be a rolling boil going into Judgment Day. Taking place on May 18, 2008 from the Quest Arena in Omaha, Nebraska, the fourth match on our card saw the codebreaker himself facing off against the Showstopper. Throughout this match, Jericho is like a jackal going after Shawn's legs, attempting to put him in the walls of Jericho. HBK keeps fanning off the attacks to his legs, however Shawn starts to favor his ribs. Jericho locks in on this and the attack is on. One of the most beautiful parts of watching Shawn Michaels work is that he registers his ribs throughout the remainder of the match. Even the little things like holding his side after a kip-up. This helps sell the believability of the injury, and in fact Jericho does lock in the walls after that specific example. Towards the end, Jericho takes a page out of HBK's playbook and plays possum by faking an injury in the corner, only to counter a sweet chin music into a codebreaker. Shawn Michaels would defeat Chris Jericho in just under 16 minutes after Michaels counters the walls of Jericho into a straddling pin maneuver. Following this competitive match, the two men share a very tense handshake as a sign of mutual respect. In what would be a very singular moment in our feud, the two men share a brief moment of mutual respect. A few weeks later, on June 9, 2008, Jericho was once again hosting his highlight reel with his guest, Shawn Michaels, who had just lost a stretcher match against Batista the evening before a one-night stand. Jericho notes, "As you can hear, the fans love you, no matter what you do." Furthermore, Jericho adds, "Case in point, you feigned the knee injury. For almost a month, you blatantly lied about it to me and to Batista." At this point, Shawn cuts him off, reminding Chris he had promised to do anything and everything to win. Jericho is visibly annoyed that Shawn was cheered more than ever after super kicking him to dispel the knee injury over a month before. Chris believes that the fan would rather boo an honest man and cheer for Shawn instead. Jericho then raised the question, how does Shawn Michaels, HBK, one of the greatest performers of all time and one of the most highly decorated superstars in the history of this business, turn into such a lying, cheating, pathetic little worm of a human being?
You want to lie to me? This is just what you want to see, buddy. This is all your fault. This is all your fault. This is what you want to do? You started all this. Now you're going to start it again. The worst is yet to come.
Chris then proceeds to clothesline HBK and throws him face first into the Jeritron 5000. As Shawn is bleeding and being attended to by medical personnel, Jericho promises that the worst is yet to come. This segment is extremely significant for Chris Jericho's character, as you can literally see him shift from a goofy rock and roll talk show host to a condescending, pissed off prick of a monster before our very eyes. He's tired of doing the right thing and being booed, while Shawn can cheat and do things like retire Ric Flair and be cheered. Jericho would make it his mission to point out the hypocrisy of Shawn Michaels. Incidentally, in a bit of irony, the scene of Shawn being thrown through the Jeritron 5000 is reminiscent of when Shawn threw his former tag team partner, Marty Jannetty, through the window in the legendary barbershop segment. Following this incident, Shawn would be forced to take some time off to nurse what would be revealed to be a detached retina. The next week on Raw, Chris Jericho blamed the entire audience for what occurred to Shawn Michaels. Ric Flair would then come out to confront Chris and noted that while Flair is retired, there's nobody stopping him from fighting Chris in the parking lot. Jericho would follow Flair out to the parking lot, but was met by Triple H. The two would square off later that night, with Lance Cade interfering so Jericho could win. Cade, an individual who is trained by Shawn Michaels, has now become Chris Jericho's protege. On the following edition of Raw that transpired on June 23, 2008, Shawn Michaels, who was sporting facial bandages, returned to attack Chris Jericho. Ultimately, Chris would throw Shawn into the commentary table and further injure his already vulnerable eye. That weekend, June 29th, 2008, at Night of Champions, Chris Jericho, who is the current IC champion at this point, is defending against Kofi Kingston. Shawn Michaels would make a surprise appearance and interfere in this match on Kingston's behalf, costing Jericho's title and awarding the Intercontinental Championship to Kofi. On the July 7th edition of Raw, despite not being 100%, Shawn Michaels would accept a match against Chris Jericho at the Great American Bash.
It isn't fair, and I understand how you feel. I mean, look at you. You're the epitome of success. You've held every major championship you've ever gone after. You've sold out arenas all over the world. You've made a lot of money. And you've done absolutely everything you ever wanted to accomplish in this line of work. You've done it. But still, in spite of all that, you're not content. In spite of all that, you've got no peace. And I'm here to tell you, Chris Jericho, that in spite of all your accomplishments, and no matter what you ever achieve, you will never be me.
Chris Jericho joined Michaels in the ring with Lance Cade by his side. Jericho points out to HBK that HBK is obviously working at less than 100% due to his eye injury, his ribs, his legs, his back, etc. And Shawn's case of martyrdom is going to backfire because the fans will ultimately turn on Shawn. Michaels realizes Jericho's hate towards him is not because he's a hypocrite, but because Shawn tells the truth. Next week's Raw on July 14th, the episode kicks off with Jericho and Michaels literally just trying to tear each other's throat out. After Jericho defeats Paul and London later on that night, Jericho and Lance Cade would put the boots on London after the match. The ever-diligent babyface, Michaels, would run out to stop this post-match beatdown. Of course, this is all building up to July 20th, 2008. Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels are squaring off at the Great American Bash. The match starts, and already Shawn Michaels is suffering through cracked ribs and internal bleeding. During the match, Jericho executes an elbow to Shawn Michaels' right eye. Michaels is going to bleed like literally a stuck pig throughout the rest of this match. Lance Cade also interferes and executes many cheap shots on Michaels while the referee's back is turned. Despite trying to rally the crowd behind him for a comeback, Shawn's counterattack is ultimately futile. After Jericho executes many shots on Michaels' face that the referee deems Michaels unable to continue, therefore Jericho is declared our winner. The following night on Raw, Jericho would cut a scathing promo on the fans. Throughout this time frame and over the next couple weeks, Jericho would start to move away from his over-the-top Y2J gimmick and transform into the suit-wearing, methodical heel, inspired in part by Anton Chigurh from No Country for Old Men, and in part by Nick Bockwinkel, who he would borrow heavily when it came to his cadence and vocabulary, speaking in very articulate, extremely measured, exceptionally intentional promos. Skipping ahead to SummerSlam on August 17, 2008, Shawn Michaels would make an appearance and be joined by his wife Rebecca as they both make their way to the ring. Shawn notes that he had a reevaluation with the doctor over his eye, and due to complications along with his previous knee and back surgeries, the doctor is recommending retirement. Shawn came out to announce his retirement with his lovely wife. He claimed that it was a good long career, and he knew it was time to walk away. At this point, Jericho comes out. Jericho insists that Michaels admit that it was Chris who had ended his career, that it was Chris beating him that had ended the Heartbreak Kid's run, and that Jericho was truly superior to Shawn in every way.
Hey there, this is Benza with Feud Rewind, coming at you with a quick word from our second unofficial sponsor, the sun. That's right, summertime is here, and the living, if your living is like mine, is extremely difficult. But what's not difficult is popping in your earbuds, putting on those headphones, using a little Bluetooth speaker, and going out into the sun while you're listening to this podcast. You and me, let's go get some vitamin D while we enjoy the sun. Thank you, sun. Now back to the show.
I want you to go home, sit your wife down, your kids down, look them in the eye, and tell them that Daddy will never, ever be Shawn Michaels.
Shawn would retort by telling Chris to sit his wife and kids down and let them know Daddy will never, ever be Shawn Michaels. At this point, the two begin to tussle, and Rebecca Michaels, Shawn's wife, is pleading for Shawn just to walk away. At this point, Jericho rears back and he punches HBK's wife square in the jaw, dropping her like a bad habit. At First, for a split second, you saw a look of concern. Mrs. Michaels is obviously not the intended target, but upon seeing how badly this hurt HBK, that concern quickly turns into a Grinch-like sense of gratification. Jericho smirks as he walks away, watching the EMTs attend to the wife of Shawn Michaels while HBK just sits there, frothing at the mouth. Understandably so. The next evening on Raw, Chris Jericho was in the ring and refused to apologize for what happened at SummerSlam. In fact, he was blaming Shawn and the fans for the incident. On August 25th, 2008, when Shawn appeared on Raw to update everyone who was asking about his wife. She was hurt, but she was going to be okay, he reassured the fans. Shawn tried to tell himself that Chris Jericho's punch was an accident, but after watching Raw and seeing Chris put the blame on Shawn in the audience while showing no remorse whatsoever, Michaels knew that something had to be done. Shawn put up an offer to sign anything, any waiver, any release, no rules, no liabilities. He didn't want anyone responsible for the revenge he would exact on Chris Jericho. Chris Jericho himself would do an excellent job of highlighting the sheer danger of this match, stating, "Shawn, if I accept this unsanctioned match, forget about your career. Your entire life is going to change." Shawn interrupts, "Are you going to accept this match or tell me what I already know?" Chris would ultimately accept, but advised that Shawn's wife and children skip watching this match as they will be horrified by what they see. Shawn, at this point, is not looking to steal the show. He wants an eye for an eye. September 1st, tensions reach a breaking point when Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels meet for the contract signing. Shawn Michaels is going to deliver one of the best and most effective lines of his career. Unforgiven took place on September 7th, 2008 from the Quicken Loans Arena in Cleveland, Ohio. Tonight's event is notable for two matches. Up fourth on the card was, as advertised, Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho in an unsanctioned fight. Translation, anything and everything is allowed. Another brutal yet beautifully laid out match saw Lance Cade interfere on Jericho's behalf, but Michaels ultimately gaining the advantage over both men, leading to HBK placing both on the announcer's table and performing a diving elbow drop through it. After returning Jericho to the ring, Michaels continued the attack. Shawn would ultimately take off his belt and repeatedly whip Jericho with it. The referee would end the match when he determined that Jericho could no longer defend himself against Michaels, making Michaels the victor by referee stoppage. The other match of note is actually going to be the main event. Wrestlers from Raw were featured in the main event, as it was a championship scramble, a 20-minute time limit bout, during which participants enter at 5-minute intervals and can become the temporary champion via pinfall or submission. Whoever would be holding the championship when the 20 minutes expired would be the champion. The match was originally scheduled to be CM Punk defending the title against JBL, Batista, Rey Mysterio, and Kane. During the event, however, Randy Orton would attack Punk, and Punk was replaced by Chris Jericho. That's right. During the match, while Batista was distracted with Rey Mysterio, that opportunistic scamp Jericho would pin Kane as time ran out. Jericho was once again the king of the world, as he was your new heavyweight champion. As Michael Cole stated, Jericho had the presence of mind to take advantage. To bleed off the damage done by others, including Batista, Jericho snuck out the back door. You could sort of read the tea leaves here and see the rationale behind this move was based on the fact that the feud with Shawn Michaels had exceeded expectations and was so hot that a title deserved to be put in the mix and be up for grabs. It could also be argued that a feud of this caliber, even at this point, didn't necessarily need a title to make the outcome feel that much more important. But I digress, as that would turn out to be something that would work out beautifully. On the following night's Raw, Jericho opened the show with a beaming smile on his face and bragged about his new championship reign. Chris also noted that since it was an unsanctioned match against Shawn, It kind of never really happened. He further reminded us that he is an honest man, a righteous man, and now he is the champion. We are now forced to recognize just how good Chris Jericho is. Near the conclusion of this fantastic promo was Chris's most poignant line. Shawn Michaels told me a month ago that I would never be him. He's right. I'm not Shawn Michaels. I'm better. On the September 15th edition of Raw, Chris Jericho's opponent for No Mercy was revealed. General Manager Mike adamantly notes that the championship needed to be defended at No Mercy, and that an individual approached him about a match against Jericho. And a match that adamantly simply couldn't pass up. He promised to introduce the challenger, but instead walked backstage.
I know what you're thinking, Chris. We've already fought in a regular match. We have fought in an unsanctioned match. What more can you and I possibly do to one another? Is there any way that we can top ourselves? It is gonna be the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels, versus Chris Jericho for the World Heavyweight Championship in a ladder match.
During the Monday Night Raw episode on September 22nd, Jericho opens the show with the World Heavyweight Championship hanging above a ladder that was positioned in the middle of the ring. Jericho climbed the ladder and sat on top with his microphone in hand.
Leave it to HBK to once again attempt to rewrite history. Last week, HBK, in an effort to, in his words, permanently disfigure me and take my championship away, convinced Mike Adamle to make our match at No Mercy a World Heavyweight Championship ladder match. And then in another one of his typical boastful, hypocritical, lying statements that your hero HBK likes to make, Shawn claimed that he revolutionized the ladder match. And like the brainless sycophants that you are, the mindless sheep that you are, you all blindly believed what he said.
So, here we are. October 5th, 2008. No Mercy is occupying the Moda Center in Portland, Oregon. Headlining our card tonight is the ladder match for the World Heavyweight Championship between current champion Chris Jericho and the challenger Shawn Michaels. But at this point, we know it's for so much more than that. It's about one of the greatest of all time defending his honor, his wife's honor, and his own legacy. And it's also about the new guard trying to establish itself as the next paragon of greatness. What we get on this night is nothing short of epic. Michaels looks to land an early sweet chin music, but Jericho brought the fight to the floor and slammed Michaels' taped left arm and shoulder into the ring post before locking in the walls of Jericho. Jericho was then able to bring the ladder into play and use it to whip Michaels. Jericho grabs a smaller second ladder and props it in the corner, but Michaels ultimately sends Jericho into this ladder. Later, Jericho performs a lionsault onto a ladder that was on top of Michaels, and at one point Lance Kate runs down to stop Michaels from climbing the ladder. Ultimately, Michaels and Jericho climb the ladder, and on either side, both of them unhook the belt and are each holding one end.
It's unstrapped. The championship middle hook. Who's got it? Jericho. Shawn's got it. No, Jericho. They both got it. Shawn's got it and Jericho's got it. Both men teetering on the ladder. The championship. It's a tug of war. Hands in the balls. The marbles. Shawn with two hands. Jericho with
Jericho pulling with his entire body weight.
Shawn trying to get the other half of the title. What a dramatic moment.
A headbutt.
And Jericho
Jericho.
retaining
The tug of war goes back and forth, with Jericho ultimately hitting Michaels in the head with a headbutt to send Michaels crashing down to the floor. After 30 minutes of hellacious action that included multiple ladders, multiple finishers, outside interference, the final dramatic sequence ended with Jericho retrieving the championship to prove once and for all that he's not Shawn Michaels, but better. Not only would this match bookend a rivalry worthy of cinema, but it would win Match of the Year honors. It would be considered by many to be one of the greatest ladder matches of all time. Mechanically, this would be the end of our feud. A few weeks later, Jericho and HBK would face off in a very excellent Falls Count Anywhere match on Raw in England, which Shawn would win. But by this point, both men had moved on to feuds with John Cena and JBL respectively. If for nothing else, the Falls Count Anywhere match was just a tasty little post-feud amuse-bouche, if you will, of two wrestling greats showcasing their transcendent in-ring prowess. Both of these men would continue to have fantastic careers, with HBK notably going on to have back-to-back WrestleMania bangers with The Undertaker after this feud, and with Jericho ultimately going on to become a learning tree.
I am the learning tree!
To both Shawn Michaels and Chris Jericho, once again, thank you both so much for the memories. And with that, this brings us to the end of the rewind for the week. I appreciate you for spending some time with me to relive some classic wrestling drama. You know to do that follow, like, subscribe, and share gimmick. We are on the socials as Feud Rewind, and our email is feudrewind@gmail.com. Fellow fan, I am your host, Benza Lance, and I will see you next week when we roll it back with another feud to rewind.